St. John the Philosopher here, and we've got something a little different today, a conversation with a new friend of the channel. Enjoy. All right, everybody. I want to introduce you to a guy that one of the few friendly interactions I've had on Twitter. uh, he's at Blue Cheese Whiskey on Twitter, the author of Elijah Men Eat Meat and a new book, which we'll talk about a little later in the video today. Joshua D. Jones. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, St. John or
Yeah.
Gabe. It
Yes.
is it is very good to be on your show. So thank you for having me. I'm well. I've just picked up my daughter from school, so it's mid-afternoon, late afternoon, getting here in England. So it's
Yeah.
already dark out. The sun is set, and it's getting way up here in the north of the world. It gets
Yes.
dark very early,
Yeah.
so we don't get a lot of sunlight.
Oh man, yeah. I'm way down here in St. Louis, so it's cold, but it's still light outside, and again, it's a 6 hour difference, so it's a little after 10 out here.
Yeah.
So a.m. For those keeping track, and yeah, the wonders of technology, right? We can have this discussion across the pond.
Yeah, fantastic.
All right, so I wanted to have you introduce yourself to my viewers and listeners, people who've heard me on the radio too. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so as you may tell from my accent, I'm originally American. I'm not actually British, but I moved over here to this side of the Atlantic right after high school, which was a long time ago now. That was 1999
Oh
that I
wow.
came over here and met a girl, got married, and now all four of my kids have been born over here. And now I'm a pastor of a evangelical
Mhm.
congregationalist church. I need to specify the evangelical nature. Uh, they're all over the place theologically. We're an evangelical congregationalist church here in England. So,
Okay, that's
I,
excellent.
and I write and blog a little bit and tweet, of course, which is how I know you. We cross paths on Twitter a good bit.
Yes, yes, and
Yeah,
then
so,
and yeah, your blog, Sanitys-Cove, right?
yeah,
Online, and I've peeked in at that occasionally. Yeah, you've always got
yeah.
some good stuff in there. I love your tweets. The occasionally snarky and I think as Christians we need a little bit more snark in our dialogue. it it
I aim to please.
it can cut both ways, right? Um, but
Let your tweets be gracious, but seasoned with salt.
yes, there
So you
you
have
go.
to have a
See,
few salty tweets thrown in there.
little salty. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. That's how we add flavor to the world.
yeah.
Um, but I wanted to talk with you about your new work. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I believe it's called "The Girl and the Guardian." Now, what's that all about?
Yeah, The Girl and the Guardian. This is my foray into fiction, biblical, or what some people call biblical fiction, which is an unusual title. And I'm happy
Hmm.
to sort of unpack what that means as a genre. It focuses in on the story of the epic of Mordecai and Esther,
Hmm.
found in the Old Testament, and
Right.
it sort of retells that. Now, it's a lot of people have attempted that and tried it. Usually, when that's done, it gets turned into sort of a modern romance.
Right.
There's been a few movies of Esther made, and the idea is you kind of fill in the backstory. Where exactly did Esther Mordecai come from? What was her relationship like with the king? A lot of these things are unknown. If you just go by the text, the story's not actually that long, so you have to imagine a lot, even if it's informed imagination. But this book doesn't take that. It's not like a 20th century, 21st century romance novel.
Right.
I read the book of Esther Mordecai as being quite dark, quite gritty. There's a lot of violence in it. There's a lot of political intrigue. When it
So
does
a
bring
little
a
more Game of Thrones than Hallmark.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's not. I think in the Veggie Tales version, Vashti gets banished for she refuses to make the king a sandwich or something. um, Yeah, so one of the early reviewers did get back with me, and they said, "Oh, okay, I'm reading a Bible story, but it kind of has this Game of Thrones vibe to it." Now, but it is redemptive. I mean, it does show God's beauty and glory in the midst of this really dark world.
Hmm.
Um, so that is the setting, and there's we retell the story, but we intentionally weave in a lot of theological reflection
Hmm.
within the book. So there is thought. It's what they call a split time novel, where you have one thing happening in the modern day, and then you have the historical story happening.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. I like that storytelling advice.
yeah, so one of the most well known would be like a movie from the late '80s, which I remembered as a small child, was The Never Ending Story,
Yes.
or The Princess Bride.
Yep,
Where the grandpa's
exactly.
reading to, and so there's a little bit of that. There's a Scottish grandfather. Oh, am I
Hmm?
frozen on you?
Oh, are you? You
You're
having
frozen
network
on
trouble?
me.
Oh no, I can see you just
Okay.
fine.
Oh, well, I'll keep going then if you can.
Okay, yeah, yeah, go ahead.
There. So there's a Scottish grandfather who's a believer talking to his 19-year-old grandson from London, and they get in conversation. And it's in this context of this relationship that the Mordecai Esther epic comes up. So it's this conversation between these two that provide a lot of the theological reflection in the book.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And now, as we were talking earlier, we were getting into the idea of beauty and the of beauty, and how that maybe relates to some of the issues that we're having culturally here in modern Western world, where
Yeah,
you have your fat pride and the multiple gender expression things, and just how those ideas of beauty kind of run contrary to the Christian idea of beauty, which at least between the two of us we believe comes from God. So
yeah,
uh, get into that a little bit. How does the story in The Girl and the Guardian touch on biblical beauty, and how does that kind of rub up against what the modern elements of I guess woke beauty are trying to
yeah.
press upon the culture?
Well, you only get into the first and second chapter of the Book of Esther, and beauty becomes a big theme. The king, Ahasuerus or Xerxes, as many historians believe him to be, wants to show off his beautiful wife Vashti. Then Esther in chapter 2 is noted for her beauty, and before she can go in front of the king, she has to go through 6 months of beauty treatments. And Persian culture was very focused on this. Just the male nobles alone, the men would have a full time makeup artist go
Oh
around
wow.
with them to the different social events and in the court, and here and there they had to wear different types of makeup for the different events that these nobles would go to, and it- you know put on fake beards and fake mustaches were a premium. These things were very expensive back then.
Wow.
And so it was a culture, really, at least among the elite, the upper classes, were obsessed with beauty and image. And it all sounds very extreme, but when you think about, how much time we spend cropping our profile picture and getting the right filter and, all the things we throw out there on social media, we're also a culture very much obsessed with this idea of image. And usually as Christian apologists, particularly in the Protestant tradition, which I think we both are,
Hmm.
we focus a lot on the question of what is true.
Hmm.
What is truthful, and we reason in search of the truth. But within church history, certainly among the church fathers, there was also the emphasis on what is true, what is beautiful.
Hmm.
God not only wove truth into the universe, but he wove beauty into the universe. And so to be able to find for this generation what is really beautiful, I think is pretty important, because even with all the woke culture and the misunderstandings of beauty, people do understand. They do know that we have a problem with beauty.
Hmm.
Most people in our generation can affirm two things that can affirm two things with us. One, that beauty in and of itself is good. I mean, we all like beautiful things, like beautiful music, beautiful
Hmm.
painting, beautiful people. But we also realize we have a very dysfunctional relationship with beauty.
Yes.
We have expressions like "don't judge a book by its cover,"
Right.
and even non-Christians will say this because they realize that it is an issue. It's a human tendency,
Hmm.
and even though it's a saying we all use, we all still do it. You know,
Oh yeah.
we all still judge a book by its cover. We all say we shouldn't, but we all do it anyway. It can be used in advertising. I mean, how many times as men, you might go for just getting shaving cream or shaving gel, and
Hmm.
one is just a plain white container, generic, and it just says shaving gel on it. And then there's one next to it that's only like maybe 10 cents more. But on it has a picture of a guy that's really ripped and huge muscles, and something
Hmm.
subtle inside your brain triggers. And you're like, all right, if I pay that extra 10 cents, it might help
Just
me get a little more muscular, or maybe
yeah, just
smell
maybe.
a little more muscular, or maybe have a shave that makes me look a little more muscular.
Yeah, get
And so,
that cut chin.
yeah, these things play on us, and we prefer the beautiful to the plain. Um and it is an issue that both Christians and non-Christians can recognize too, so to be able to speak to this issue. And of course there's things like pornography. There's
Hmm.
also eating disorders,
Oh
and
yeah.
all these things go back, whether it's an eating disorder, anorexia, and pornography, advertising. All these things come back to an obsession with a certain image.
Mm, yeah.
We believe the gospel can speak into this in a unique way.
Yeah, definitely. One of the interesting things about, I guess, just life in general that I've found is that there are things that we were made for. There are things that we were made to be capable of understanding and viewing. It's the laws of the universe kind of written on our hearts. Including the moral law, right? Is the
Yeah,
laws of beauty and truth and those ideas, and how even things like our God-given sexual desires and things like that, what we were talking about, can be twisted into something horrible, right? So
yeah,
our God-given understanding of beauty, our desire for beauty, is twisted into an obsession. It's twisted into something self-destructive, or it's twisted through denial, where where we start calling ugly things beautiful just to defy the norm, or
mhm,
when and in the same way, the same idea with truth, right? We're obsessed with truth,
yeah,
and yet we're enamored with all of these lies. So it's very interesting to me how we have all of these things that are put in us by God for his purposes, and all of the sin, all of the things that we see that are wrong with the world, is when we take those beautiful things that God put in us, and we twist them or we use them wrongly. And
yeah,
so I love to see um, the Christian view of things affirmed, because I think culturally we need that reorientation.
mm,
We need to get back to promoting and understanding the godly view of all of the natural things that we're drawn towards.
yeah. I mean, as Christians, we can err in different ways. One
Hmm.
way, and I think this is maybe a particularly a Protestant. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a Protestant overreaction sometimes to beauty, because we know how easily it can be abused. We
Right.
know how easily it can deceive. We know that in this fallen world, because of sin, the good, the true, and the beautiful, those three things sometimes shatter and are not one and the same.
Yeah.
Something can be beautiful, but not necessarily, or seem beautiful, but not be
Hmm.
true.
Yeah.
It can be
Satan
deceptive.
appearing as an angel of light.
Yes. Or conversely, we can use the truth sometimes in ways that aren't gracious and therefore not beautiful.
Like
We
gossip.
can, yeah, we can like gossip or hammer it, or in a condemning sort of way,
Hmm.
pointing out faults to condemn instead of to save and to rescue. And Protestants reacted against both, well, not just Catholic, but also Eastern, or a lot of Eastern Orthodox art. iconography, these things that were maybe elevated to an unhealthy status within the Catholic or Eastern Orthodox Church to the place of idolatry. And,
Mm-hmm.
we have a tradition then that kind of rejected all artwork outright almost,
Oh
we
yeah,
did,
yeah.
we were so tempted, we were so thinking, well, if we make our churches too beautiful or, then we got to be really plain so that we're not tempted to worship the art or the creativity. And that is a real tendency. I'm not trying to dismiss all that. As humans, we can worship the beautiful and fall down and worship these angels,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean the beautiful in and of itself is bad. So we need to be able to affirm the beautiful while also being aware of these pitfalls.
Right, definitely. One of the things I say in my adult Bible study class that I teach, haven't for a while because of the pandemic, but that's
Yeah,
neither here nor there, right? But one
yeah,
of the things I like to say is that humans do extremes very well.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's
That's true.
so if it's we're talking about beauty, then either it's an idol or it's something to be shunned. If we're talking
Yeah,
about technology, it's something to be abused for all things, or it's something to be completely abandoned, like like the uh um, um I'm forgetting the name of the Christian sect who separate them, the uh uh, gosh, big black hats.
the Amish.
Amish, yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Gosh, I'm losing my words today. But yeah. So I mean, and we there are even Christian sects out here who refuse to have musical instruments inside their building as part of
yeah,
their worship, right?
yeah,
Because on the other end, you have guys who are basically putting on concerts and self-aggrandizing as opposed to
yeah.
actually worshiping God. So we have those extremes on either end, and we don't seem to be able to get any of this stuff right, and it hurts my heart sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is a difficult one to get right, and I say that even as a pastor, and we have to make practical decisions about what our church building is going to look like.
Yeah,
Are we going to put art in there? Are we going to keep it simple or minimalist, or are we going to have paintings in there? And this isn't even getting into the whole controversy about do you have paintings of Jesus, and does
right.
that violate the second commandment? And it's a big theological debate around that. Um, but yeah, our hearts are these idol factories, and
Hmm.
we take good things and elevate them to ultimate things. But I think the gospel sets us free in a unique way, and it's really Luther. It's funny. Luther didn't really care much for the Book of Esther.
Hmm.
Luther didn't think there was much. Kind of like the Book of James, he didn't see a lot of good theological material
Right.
in Esther. The book of Esther never actually mentions God. The name of God is not mentioned in the book of Esther. And so he didn't care much for it. However, it was some of the writings of Luther that really guided me in how to interpret this book and how to interpret Esther, and then how to write The Girl and the Guardian, which is my retelling of it.
Hmm.
Luther never he never wrote a work just on beauty. So there is no Luther's you know work on beauty, but he did comment on it here and there, like in his commentary on the Psalms, particularly, and other places. He kind of had these little asides where he'd have a couple paragraphs and he'd reflect on beauty in the context of explaining some bit of scripture or something else. And Luther, what he did, he really rooted beauty in the cross in a
Yes.
way that earlier Christian thinkers had not.
Hmm.
Uh, a lot of the early church fathers, on into the scholastics in the Middle Age, a lot of them borrowed very heavily from the Greek thinkers
Yes.
on the nature of beauty. And that's not necessarily bad. A lot of what they had to say was probably good and correct. And they talked about form and proportion and how beauty transcends the created order. And there's a lot that the Greeks said about beauty that Christians can affirm. But the thinking up to that point had affirmed beauty as a created thing from God. And though they might say, well, Christ is beautiful or the cross is beautiful, they never are articulated very well how the cross is really the center of God's beauty.
Hmm.
And Luther did that,
Mm.
and he almost did it in a throwaway, in a typical Luther, just this kind of these throwaway sentences that he made, you know. But he said that, those who are truly beautiful, um, and it's in the exact quote is in the book, but I'm probably not going to get it quite right. But the um, God makes beautiful those who make themselves ugly, and He makes
Mm.
ugly those who make themselves beautiful.
Right.
And the cross is the great exchange.
Yeah.
He said that the cross is where Christ exchanges His beauty for our ugliness.
Mm.
And when you look to the cross, you see both beauty and ugliness.
Oh, for
The
sure.
ugliness is ours, and the beauty is Christ's.
Yes. Yes. That's
You
great.
know, and we love the cross. The scene of the cross, it's beautiful, and yet it's ugly at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's our ugliness mixing with Christ's beauty, and there's an exchange there. He becomes ugly so we can become beautiful. And so Luther has these collection of little sentences on beauty here and there, and you kind of bring them on together, and there's some real powerful things that then is kind of woven into this retelling of Esther. Because that ultimately Esther's most beautiful moment is not when she comes out of 6 months of beauty treatments and then wows the king in the bedroom,
Right.
but when she humbles herself for 3 days of prayer and fasting, and then submits herself and humbles herself before the king and risks her life. She could be chopped to death by the immortal bodyguards who had axes on either side of the king. She risked her own life and humbled herself, and in this act of sacrifice, that was her most beautiful moment, because it was when she was most like Christ.
Yes.
That's when she becomes a very small picture of what Christ ultimately does for us.
One thing that I always find interesting is how in culture, in our movies, our stories, the ones that really hit biggest, we find these common themes that at least to me point to a very biblical understanding of the world.
Yeah,
Our the greatest moments in movie history are usually when the hero is doing what he believes is a complete self-sacrifice, right? He's like, I'm going
yeah,
to die doing this, or they make the decision is like, hey, that's a suicide mission, and they just kind of
yeah,
that cool, well, I know, or they don't say anything, they just go do the thing, right?
yeah,
Those are the wonderful moments that everybody loves. It's like, oh, that's what really makes a hero, and we
yeah,
all understand this intuitively, right?
yeah,
But there it is. It's the story of Superman, the story of Neo in the Matrix. All of these
yeah,
things are about very powerful people who humble themselves to self-sacrifice,
yeah.
for the sake of people that they don't even know.
Yeah, Iron
Or
Man is the latest in the great epics, sacrificing himself to Thanos to save the world. And
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So it's all built in there, and you see all the reaction videos on YouTube of people crying at the sacrifice of Tony
yeah,
Stark. I am
yeah,
Iron Man, right? And it's that beauty that they're witnessing there is really
yeah,
just a microcosm of the beauty of Christ,
yeah,
and the cross itself, right? It's ugly
yeah,
because of the death, the destruction. Those scenes have an ugliness to them, when
yeah,
the hero is sacrificing himself, but there's so much beauty in the action that's going on there, right?
yeah,
So it's built, it's woven into our culture. And I think, we as Christians, if we're going to turn things around, because things don't seem to be going very well for us lately,
mm,
engaging in that culture, and using the Bible and biblical stories to engage that portion of people's brains, I think is really
yeah,
where it's at.
yes,
Yeah, and that's one of the
yeah,
reasons why I love the idea of biblical fiction.
yeah, yeah. Well, good. It's kind of a weird term, and sometimes you throw it out there, and people scratch their heads and like, what do you mean biblical fiction? I guess one of the most popular examples of that going on right now would be The Chosen.
Yes, love that
This
show.
the internet video sensation, really, where they'll take a story in the Gospels and then create all this backstory to that character.
Hmm.
Here's an example. I don't think this has been done exactly, but they might take the like the episode of the woman anointing Jesus's feet with alabaster and
Hmm.
washing it with her tears and drying it with her hair and all that. And we don't really know who that woman is. She kind of appears in the Gospels and breaks into this dinner with the Pharisees and weeps at Jesus's feet there in Luke 7 and then disappears. We don't know where she came from. We don't know what happened to her. Biblical fiction then would try to ask historically minded questions.
Right.
What this would, the Gospels refer to her as a sinner.
Hmm.
What might that have implied? What might her life have looked like? How typically did women get reputations like that? And create a bit of a story. And then usually at the end of the episode, that's when she breaks in and the gospel bit, the part that we know that happened.
Right.
The part that we know is true happened, but then they kind of imagine some backstory to give it some context or to flesh it out and make it a bit more real.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that Chosen has done so epically well. I think
Yeah,
is give us a view and what seems like a fairly historically accurate to some level view of these people and these characters, who they might be. Matthew has been an interesting one for me in particular,
yeah,
because
yeah,
they made him basically on the spectrum, which is a
yeah,
very a fascinating choice to me. And it adds so much to the character. And it's like, oh wow, I kind of get him. It's like he's just trying to do the analysis of why things are the way that they are. It's like, this Jesus
yeah,
guy defies all of my analysis. I have to follow him to figure this out. And
yeah,
it's just one of those really great things. um and
yeah.
yeah,
Fascinating. That's right.
it's cool.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I really love that because my son is on the spectrum.
Okay, yeah.
He's autistic and he does a lot of these things with his hands, and
Mhm.
so when I'm watching it, I really appreciate that they put that in there.
Oh yeah, it's definitely cool. I mean, you also have that a I won't say the forced diversity of the random representation, but like a real decision, a real creative decision to
Yeah,
bring in some representation. I love when they do that, as
yeah,
opposed to some of the the kind of fake woke tokenism that they like to do these days,
yeah,
where they just they take a historical figure, they change their race, they change their gender, and they say, hey,
yeah,
look, we did a thing. but 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 yeah, so this is the type of thing that I really want to
yeah,
emphasize too, is the Christian engagement in the culture, because we
yeah,
we've been, um on some level we've been shut out, and on some level we've shut ourselves out of pop culture, and it's
yeah,
been epically to our detriment, I think,
yeah,
because um as often as we may have time with our kids, as much as we bring them to Sunday school, we bring them to church with us, that's a few hours a week, but
yeah,
they're spending however many hours a day in school. They're spending however many of the rest of the day, steeped in music and entertainment and movies and pop culture references that are all orienting them away from the gospel. And so
yeah,
we need to occupy those spaces more. And
yeah.
things like the Girl and the Guardian, I think, are helping to do that. And so I definitely want to promote that as much as possible, because
No,
we
thank
we
you.
we surely need those types of things.
Yeah.
So
Well,
so
thank you. It's a tough question, and
mhm,
that question really is. It does play a part, not just in the Girl and the Guardian, but in the Book of Esther itself, because this was a time. This was 50 years after Cyrus
mm,
announced that the Jews could return to Jerusalem. So the book is set in a context of real cultural tension for the people of God. Like, are should all the Jews return to Israel and be living there, or is it right that some Jews should stay and be involved in
mm,
Susa and Persian life? And this is talked about. I put this in the dialogue. Hadassah, or Esther's Jewish name there, Hadassah and Mordecai are arguing about this very early on in the book. Hadassah wants to return to Israel to get to know her extended family who's in Israel, and Mordecai thinks that they should stay, and they get in a big fight over the whole thing. Um, And ironically, she goes, "Listen, I'm sick of these Persians. I'm out of here." And this is all right before she gets taken and ends up becoming the queen of the Persians.
Right.
So there is this, and that I believe that tension is in the original book, and I try
Mhm.
to flesh that out a lot in my retelling of it.
Yeah, and that tension I think is what's kind of been going on with Christians in culture as well, where we're trying to be what's the phrase, in the world but not of the world kind of
Yeah,
thing. But then there are those of us who are essentially segregationists, where you're like, you know what, we can't deal with these people anymore. We need to go and create Christ land where we can be happy without all of this persecution and things like that.
yeah,
So on some level, and I can see the value in both, because it's especially when it comes to children, it's tough to send your children out who are unprepared for the world
yeah,
as pseudo evangelists for Christianity in in
yeah.
in in a,
And
in
they're
a
9 years old, right?
exactly. It's like, yeah, you're not sending out 9-year old missionaries to that school. You're just sending
Yeah.
out a kid to get indoctrinated by that school.
I
um
tell you what, yeah, it have. I mean, my kids, we pray with our kids and we read the Bible to our kids. But a couple of years ago, we've sent our kids to the local schools,
mhm.
and one of them is it has a veneer of Christianity. It's what they call here in this country a Church of England school. So it has
Okay.
a little bit of spiritual input, but not much. It's still largely secular. But it's the
Right.
closest thing we can get to a Christian school in our area. There's just no other
Yeah.
alternative.
No alternatives.
Um,
Yeah,
and
and
but
it's
even
tough.
one of my kids came home not long ago. I won't say which one because I don't want to embarrass him. But we were discussing some issue, and I just threw out an idea. I was like, "Well, what do you think about this?" And this child responded, and they said, "Yeah, but Dad, are you saying that because you're a straight white cisgendered?" Yeah,
Oh.
and
Oh.
this is not an old child. This is a
Red
young child. This is
red
not
flag, red
an
flag.
17 or 18-year-old. And I laughed because I'm like, well, I tweet about this stuff all the time. I blog about this stuff all the time. I'm engaged in debates with this stuff all the time. And now to see it coming out of a small child,
Yeah.
in that direction, I was like, where did you hear that? Oh, they explained it in school that, you'll
Mhm.
probably say this if you're this person. And I'm like, okay. And I explained, I was like, regardless if I'm a man or a woman, or regardless of my skin color, 2 plus 2 is still equal 4. You
That's
you
right.
can't dismiss an argument just on the basis of you have to deal with the argument. You can't just say,
Yes.
"Oh, you understand that because you're a man, or you're straight, or you're not gay," or like no, that's not the way
Yeah.
truth works. And so it
Yeah,
led
it's
to a very
it's
long
it's
conversation in the evening. But yeah, but it is hard. I sympathize
it's
with people
impressive.
who do want to run from the world
Oh,
and
yeah.
retreat because they see Babylon devouring their children like popcorn.
Yes,
And it's
definitely.
tragic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think ultimately we may have to kind of adopt a sort of both and stance, where we kind of set, we determine where home base is, and we always are capable of retreating to home base. We protect our most vulnerable in home base, right? So that
Yeah,
whether that's Christian schools if you can get them, homeschool if you have to,
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that, to protect the children, because they're the most vulnerable to this sort of
yeah,
indoctrination. But at the same time, we need to be fully engaged. We need more outspoken Christian conservative type teachers. We need more Christian conservative type entertainers, media
mm,
folk, things that we have been neglecting or running from or hiding inside. Which another
mhm,
thing I've heard about is all of the Christian conservatives who are just basically in the closet out in Hollywood and whatnot. Um,
yeah,
we need to be a little more. I mean, even if we can't come out, so to speak, I keep using this terminology. It kind of feels
mm,
funny. Um, that we still need to cultivate some influence. We need to plant some seeds. Need to be a little more, at least overt in action and message, if
yeah,
nothing else. Because you know it's been 40, 50 years since the beginnings of the infiltration of leftward thinking and atheistic, anti-Christian sort of thinking in those spaces. And they've been working on it for a long time. They've just been boiling the frog, right?
Yeah.
Well, we have to go in the opposite direction. We have to do
Yeah.
do the same thing, just towards truth, and it's going to be a slow process because it's been a long time coming, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some huge questions around this for leaders. There was, of course, a few years ago, you may have come across it, the book called The Benedict Option.
Mm, I've heard of
Um,
it. I haven't
yeah,
read it yet.
it created a stir in a lot of Christian circles because it basically kind of con conceded defeat in the culture wars
Oh
and said,
wow.
"Listen, we've lost the culture wars. What we need to do for a season is to sort of circle up our wagons, raise
Mm.
our children, form huddled Christian communities for a generation or two until culture becomes less hostile."
Oh no, that's not how that
Lawful.
works.
And we because right now we're getting our butts kicked and we need to withdraw. A strategic retreat was what kind of what it argued for. But it's called the Benedict option because it was arguing that this is what Saint Benedict did when
Hmm.
he created monasteries, that the Roman Empire was just so corrupt, there was so much decadence, there was so much sexual immorality, that all the true Christians sort of escaped to the desert to
Hmm.
form these monasteries. And then once Rome collapsed and everything fell apart, then they went back in later as missionaries and evangelists, which is an interesting point of history. And Saint, I guess, in terms of historical influence, Saint Benedict did do pretty well, and a lot of
Hmm.
Christian culture was preserved inside of these monasteries. Um, and so that's sort of what this guy is arguing for. I felt, well, there's probably some truth to that. Like you said, I think you said it well. You said it got to be a both end thing.
Yeah.
There's still something in me that wants to hope and pray for a revival, for a move of God's Spirit,
Hmm.
just an outpouring of God's grace, and to see many people swept into the kingdom in a powerful way. I don't really want to throw in the towel quite so soon.
Oh yeah, and one thing that I like to think, especially in the COVID lockdown sort of period where a lot of people are going to get used to not going to church.
Yeah,
I kind of get the feeling that maybe God is just kind of pruning us, where he's cutting out the dead wood, so to speak. He's pulling out some of the chaff that's been growing up among us to give us wheat a little more room to grow and get a little stronger, get our roots a little deeper, because there's going to be work ahead that we're going to have to do, and
yeah,
and of course then the revival, it would come on the tail of all of that work, right? Um,
yeah,
so I'd like to think that what we're seeing here is God's pruning, but he has his own ways of doing things. So
yeah.
we can just pray and watch and hope, right? Um, but I don't know. What the, and I've been wanting to ask this question. Um, America kind of feels like a mess right now. So what does it look like from over there?
But it's interesting. Britain is one of these places that when America sneezes, Britain catches a cold.
Right.
We get it. The Black Lives Matter riots and protests. They were happening over here a week after they started in America, in London,
Wow.
and they're using all the same slogans. Now, they were shouting saying like, "Hey ho, don't shoot." What was the thing from
Yeah.
Ferguson where it's like,
Hands up, don't shoot.
now like cops here in England don't carry guns.
Yeah.
And yet, this is what it's like. Cops here are very different than in America. Like they're not
Yes.
seen as this security force. They're just like community help. Basically, what
Right.
we call it. They walk around in yellow vests and they don't have guns on them, and they're there to just kind of help and warn and give traffic citations. They're not these intimidating people that might pull a gun on you, or careful, you might get shot by the police. And
Right.
yet, all the protests were happening, and cops were getting pelted and attacked, and police were getting beat up. Had nothing to do with what happened in America. But
Of
everyone's
course.
saying that we have a problem with police brutality here in Britain. Now, might there be a police? Yeah, I'm sure some cops are brutal and some cops are stupid. and some idiots become cops, and they need better training and maybe need to. Sure.
Hmm.
But I guess from this side, it seems like America is. Sometimes the news makes it out like it's about to break out in civil war. I mean, you know, it's there's such an extremism with
Hmm.
people like Donald Trump,
Yep.
seeming to represent one side, and then people on the left like AOC,
Hmm.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that where she is, and then they're calling for communism, and
Yeah.
others are, so it seems like such extreme, intense. Seattle, what was that? The
Yeah.
Chaz?
Jazz.
It's like it's insane. Defund the police. Like what?
Hey, there
That's
was
not
one
going to work really
community in
well as a campaign slogan in most places. I don't.
there was
But
one community actually did it. And now they're regretting it.
gee, and suddenly there's this spike in crime. We don't understand the connection.
Exactly.
Um, so yeah, it sounds like. I mean, it in a way, I'm almost glad not to be in America right now. I mean, it
Yeah.
just sounds so wild, and I think there's a lot of questions regarding Biden's incoming. Is he going to be the moderate Biden of 20 years ago when he was more of a sort of a centrist Democrat, or is he kind of jump ship into the more extreme left wokeism?
Yeah.
Is he going to be a far left Democrat, or is he going to be kind of moderate? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what all happens, and I guess that depends on if Republicans keep control of the Senate or not. If that's going to be like a bulwark against a lot of his legislation, I don't know.
Yeah, it looks like the Senate's going to hold. They've definitely lost some power in the House too. They lost, I think, 13 seats, um, which has
The
narrowed their
Democrats lost.
majority. Yeah, the Democrats lost 13 seats to they got flipped to Republican, which is all very interesting. When you consider that the original analysis was saying that they were going to lose 13 seats, so it's just
Yeah,
kind of lends a little credence to the like what's going on with the presidential side argument, but. I think you're right in that from the news perspective, from if all you're doing, at least in America, is spending time on social media, it does very much feel like verge of civil war sort of stuff. But the thing is, just living your life out here. If you go to the grocery store, nobody's at each other's throats. Nobody's
yeah,
uh, nobody's scratching up cars with the Biden Harris stickers on them. Although you might there is a dearth though of Trump stickers because there's the worry that your car would get for those kind of things. So
yeah,
I guess at the same time where real life is kind of still just going on, there is still that underlying fear, underlying trepidation, I guess, about the state of the country, like what we're really like underneath, and if some of that stuff is going to explode into the mainstream. So
yeah,
yeah, so I guess basically you're getting the same news we're getting, and it feels the same
yeah,
way. So I guess that's
yeah,
I'm not sure if that's good to know, but it is what it is, right? Um,
yeah. We're under national
and
lockdown at the moment here in England.
yeah, and I was wondering about that too. I guess some of the because the U.S. kind of runs itself more like the EU essentially, where each state is an independent little country on some
Yeah,
level, and the governor is a
yeah,
is is a prime minister. Then there are states like New York and California that are locking down again. But
yeah.
my state's relatively open. There are
What's your
counties
state?
within my state. I'm in Missouri.
Yeah. Missouri. Okay.
Yep, right smack dab in the middle of the country.
Yeah,
And interestingly enough, the St. Louis County, the larger metropolitan
yeah,
area here in Missouri, is trying to lock down a bit more, and then the rest of the state is like, oh heck no. so
yeah,
so we're so there's a little. I think it's
yeah,
kind of showing a rural and urban divide more so
yeah,
than any other, and I think that may actually be the main issue right
yeah.
now.
Someone was telling me America, it's not an issue of red states versus blue states.
Hmm.
Someone was saying that there are no blue states. There are
Right.
blue cities,
Yes.
If even if what you call a blue state or Democrat state, if you look at it by county, you have all
Hmm.
this red rural land,
Yes.
then, even New York would be largely red if you
Yeah.
just looked at it from a bird's eye view. But then once you get to the densely populated cities, it all of a sudden becomes blue. And it is a cultural divide. There's a value divide between rural America and urban America, no doubt.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that's it's somebody described it as the blue archipelago. So, it just
Okay,
just
I like that.
floating in a sea of red. And
Yeah,
that's really what the county, if you look at the county by county voting records, that's what the map
yeah,
kind of looks like. It looks like a blue archipelago in a sea of red. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, and it makes me curious though, as to if there are any biblical implications about city life that kind of lends itself to what we're seeing, because a lot of bad things seem to happen in cities in the Bible. So I don't know.
That's true. It's true, but a lot of great things happen in cities too.
True, that's true. I mean,
We're after the New
the New
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, the New
There we
Jerusalem is
go.
going to be a big city, right? So there you go.
Cities seem to take things and just amplify them.
Yes,
Whatever's in the culture, it just gets amplified. But the
that's
good
a good
end of
point.
that.
That's a good
Yeah.
point. Yep, definitely. All right. So, I guess I'm curious, in England, or in the UK, I should say, if religion crosses over into politics nearly as much as it does seem to, at least in America.
No, nowhere in Western Europe really does it
Mm,
do that. Not even in Italy, where the Catholic Church historically has had a lot of say so. Even Italy is very secular now.
hmm
You have to go out into Eastern Europe, where Poland is maybe one place where the Catholic Church would still exercise a fair bit of influence. Hungary has been an interesting country
hmm
because the prime minister there has throughout his whole career has been an atheist
Oh
and very
wow.
secular. However, in reaction, he's a conservative guy, and really about maybe 7 or 8 years ago, all of a sudden he started. I don't know how much of it's sincere, and I don't know how much of it is just political, but he started putting a lot of emphasis on the Christian history of Hungary.
Oh
Part
wow.
of that was a reaction to the massive Islamic, um, migration into Europe,
Right. Right.
and him wanting to preserve the identity. Part of it was conflicting with Western countries in the EU, like France, which are militantly secular,
Yes.
and they try to erase a lot of the history. And so, even this guy, he may not be a believer himself, but has become a voice for very pro-family. Now that the government actually pays you, I think if a woman, I might, we'll have to Google this maybe.
Yeah.
I think if a woman has 4 children, she doesn't have
hmm
to pay taxes for the rest of her life
Oh
or
wow.
something. She's
There you
she's
go.
tax exempt. If it's Hungarian woman, if she's a Hungarian woman, that if she has 4 children, you're tax free.
I
Um,
like that.
and I think
I'm
it came out
I'm gonna
maybe
propose
5.
that someplace.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I thought, wow, because we have 4 kids. I thought, wow, we're living in the wrong country. But I think you have to be a Hungarian to get it.
Right.
But when that came out, that was seen very negatively here in the West.
Really?
Eastern Europe used to be under communism.
Right.
And whereas we here in Western Europe, in Britain, Scandinavia, the Western European countries did not. And so a lot of this wokeism, a lot of this far left resurgence and Marxism and socialism, it's very popular here in Western Europe. But
Right.
in Eastern Europe, where everyone's parents and grandparents grew up under this stuff, they're like, no,
Oh,
thank you.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
we,
heck no.
we, we remember the Berlin Wall, and the guns were only facing in one direction.
Right.
People from the West weren't trying to escape into the East. People from the East were trying to escape into the West. The wokeism and the new left, very popular in Western Europe, not so popular in Eastern Europe. They want to go
hmm
back to the traditions, and some of it is just traditional cultural Christianity.
Right.
I'm not trying to say there's these massive revivals in Eastern Europe. I'm not trying to say it's genuine faith, but there is this sense of we're Polish or we're Hungarian, we're Orthodox or we're Catholic, and there's this desire to connect with the the past, which in an Eastern European sense is a Christian past, at least
Right. So
Christian.
it's more of a sort of religious nationalism than anything else.
Yeah, it can be that. I mean, some of it might be sincere, but some of it is wanting to preserve a cultural national identity,
Right.
and not give into either atheism or Islam, you know. And so there is some sincere searching in all of that.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I always find that period of the transition to the Holy Roman Empire is one of those interesting ones where, Rome went from one, being one thing to all of a sudden Christian. Everybody's Christian now, right?
Yeah,
And when it's really just okay, well, that's the national religion, so I guess I'm that. While there,
yeah,
like you said, that there were, there could still be sincere, transformation
yeah,
going on. Obviously, there was a church in Rome since way
yeah,
back, right? So they probably saw attendance spike, and they were happy about
yeah,
it, but and the gospel was still going out, but inevitably it just kind of turned into a I hate to use the phrase, but social construct,
yeah,
just kind
yeah,
of built onto the world, and we're seeing that now too in America, particularly right now. I think because while biblical values at least had a place in public life or and particularly in political life for a long time, partially I think because of the nature of our founding. Um, I think the gap between the cultural Christians and the real Christians, I suppose, for lack of a better term, has been widening.
yeah,
There are a lot of people who call themselves Christians who have not a lick of a Christian worldview, and
mm,
it shows, and it's really
yeah,
rough, and it's been weakening the church's influence on our politics. You know,
yeah,
so I'm hoping to get back to well, I won't say get back. I'm hoping, that a spiritual revival will also lead to sort of a national political revival as well, just because there are things like, the abortion and a lot of the extremes of the LGBT movement and things like that, we're giving hormone blockers to 7-year-olds, things like that.
yeah.
I'm hoping for the reassertion of biblical values and truth in
Yeah, none of
public
that
life.
happens in Eastern Europe.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't happen like that. The whole LGBT trans thing,
Oh
make your
yeah.
kids boys wear dresses. Yeah, that won't happen in Poland or Hungary.
Right.
Uh,
So
you
exactly.
know,
Even if they're
but in
just
England all
cultural
the time.
Christians, they're not gonna
Yeah,
go for that stuff.
yeah, it's like no, that's not Hungarian or that's not Polish. In England, it happens all the time.
Sure.
You know, here in my country, it's very open to wokeness, but yeah, not in
Yeah.
Eastern Europe.
Yeah. So I'm hoping books like The Girl and the Guardian are part of a new wave of Christian cultural influences that can spur some changes in the West, because I think on some level capturing the imagination of young people is one way to sort of open them up to the possibilities of the gospel
Yeah,
and just clearing the bushes, so to speak,
yeah,
of some of the ideology that they've been
yeah,
fed. So we're running up, I think, on time here, so
yeah.
I'm gonna wrap this up. But I definitely want to encourage everybody to pick up this book, The Girl and the Guardian. I'm going to link it in the description, as well as Elijah Men Eat Meat, which is an awesome book about masculinity. Am I correct in that, or give me the
It,
description of that one?
in part, so it has been described as like a book of readings for men, but a lot of
Hmm.
women have picked it up and say they like it too. So it deals with a whole host of issues, but the core of it is a call for reformation and revival, a challenge to our prayer lives, and it follows the story of Elijah. It's not biblical fiction; it is a nonfiction book,
Hmm.
but it focuses a lot around expounding the passages of Elijah. So it's kind of different in genre than The Girl and the Guardian. Um, yeah,
Yep, good, good. Because I think our fight in the culture war is gonna go. I like to talk about religion, culture, and politics on my channel, and I say it in that order because I think that's the order of influence. Where
Yeah,
religion deals with individuals, culture is kind of all of us collectively coming together on
yeah,
what determining about reality, and then
yeah.
politics is our expression of that in the law. And so it sounds like Elijah Men Eat Meat is our religion primer, and the Girl and the Guardian is going to be our cultural influence, and hopefully,
Uh-huh.
between those two, we can start poking at that political part. Um, so it was great talking with you, Joshua. It's our first opportunity to talk face to face, as it were, and
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. And
sure.
again, everybody definitely pick up these books and check
I'll
out
tell you what.
Sanitys-Cove. Hmm.
How about if I do something for your watchers and your listeners? Can I do? Can I
Okay.
give something to you guys?
Sure. Yeah,
Let,
definitely.
let me. I don't know about you, but like sometimes before I buy a book, I like to sample it.
Yeah.
I like to read it, yeah, especially if I'm in a bookstore. I'll pick it up and read a chapter, and then
Right.
decide if I'm going to go buy it or not. So, how about if I upload just a small PDF with maybe 20 pages or so
Oh,
of
that sounds
the book?
great.
And I'll send you the link. You can put that in your description or however, and then your people, because if especially if they're not big readers, like me, I'm a big reader. I go through books all the time, but some people they're slower. They take their time and they're more particular about their advice. So let me throw out a link to a sample.
All right.
Your listeners can download just a free PDF, and then they can decide if they want to get it or not, if it's
Well,
worth
that's
investing the time
great.
and money. Would that be okay?
That's excellent. Yeah, exclusive
Good.
to the
Okay.
St. John the Philosopher
Yeah.
subscribers. Yeah, there you go. So, okay, so we'll get that together. We'll put it in the description of this video, and we'll
Yeah,
go
I'll
from
get that
there.
sent up and get that to you this evening, which
Excellent.
is now. It's evening
Yes.
now for me.
Yeah.
So,
Evening's now
so in
for
the
you.
next couple hours, you'll get it.
All right. Okay. So, well, I again, it's been great talking to you, Joshua. We're definitely going to have to do this again. Maybe
Sure.
expand our topics, talk about other things, and
Okay.
we'll compare notes about what's going on in Western civilization from across the
All right.
pond.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So
All right.
we'll be
It's
we'll be
been
talking
great.
to you soon.
Good, St.
All right.
John. Bye bye.
All right. God bless. Tell me what you think of this video. What did you think about all the topics that Joshua and I discussed today? What do you think about Joshua's work? Discuss in the comments. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, and share for more videos on religion, culture, and politics. That's all for today. This is St. John the Philosopher. Goodbye, God bless, and we'll see you in another video.